Welcome everybody to our one of our vineyard interview series. We've got a familiar face with us, and we've got a new face as well. Todd Harrington, the vineyard manager for a lot of the Corliss properties. We talked about Blue Mountain Vineyard here recently, and with Todd is Eduardo Enriquez, who is our boots on the ground vineyard manager for all the Corliss properties. And we work with, of course, Red Mountain Vineyard, which we're going to talk about today, Blue Mountain Vineyard, and BlackRock. So Eduardo manages all the teams on the ground that take care of all of our vineyards. So welcome, gentlemen. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Doing great, Trey. Thanks for having us.
Good to have you back. Beautiful day in the neighborhood for sure. Well, we're going to talk about Red Mountain Vineyard, and we have been working with you guys on Red Mountain for quite a while, and it's of course a large portion of our reserve program. We have Cabernet out there, we have Cab Franc, and we have Merlot, and all three of those varietals end up in some way, shape, or form in the Archimage. The Illusionist a little bit ends up in the Conjure as well. But today we're going to talk about Red Mountain Vineyard. Before we dive into the vineyard, though, Todd, since you've already had your say when we talked about Blue Mountain, about your background, Eduardo, why don't we talk a little bit about your background? Tell us how long you've been farming, how long you've been working for the Corliss team, things of that nature.
Well, I started working for Mike Corliss in 2006. Started working Blue Mountain Vineyard 2004. 2008, we started farming Red Mountain in 2008. And we've been growing since then. So now we're farming about 350 acres.
It's crazy. I mean, 08 was 08 the year that you guys bought that property, because that was formerly Sand Hill Winery, right?
Correct.
Okay, and so you guys bought that property in 08?
I think 2007.
Okay.
It was farmed by John Gomez in 2007.
Okay.
And then I took over in 2008.
And that's about, Keith, is that the year we started working with that?
Ooh, that was before my time. You started working with that in 08 or 09.
Yeah. Yeah, let's go back and look at some of the tasting notes sheets for those.
Yeah, I think it may have been 2008. I know for sure 2009 you were working with that fruit.
Yeah. You guys sell to obviously multiple clients, obviously Corliss uses fruit for their own program and all the stuff you guys do, but you're selling Red Mountain. How many clients do you have in Red Mountain?
Just our properties on Red Mountain in total, I think we probably have 20 to 25 different clients. We sell to about 50 in total, but that's again spread between properties in the Gorge, Walla Walla, Benton City. So,
right.
And I do have to feel Eduardo's being overly modest. He is the rubber to the road, where the rubber meets the road with our farming operation, and has grown his responsibilities from managing 60 acres in Walla Walla back when we first started to, like you said, 350 of very, very high quality vines spread across 80 miles between here and between Walla Walla and Benton City. So I can't give enough credit to what he provides to our management team and the ultimate quality that ends up in the fruit we deliver and the quality in the glass.
Todd, when we're texting about vineyard stuff all year long, I'm just including you just to be nice. It's really just Eduardo is the one that I really need to answer my questions for me. So.
Yeah, true.
I started when I was 29 years old. I'm 48, almost 48. But we love what we do. Every time we're doing a new planting, it's really exciting. Keep us motivated and keep us moving.
Well, we certainly appreciate what you guys do on our end for sure. So you make Keith's job much easier in the cellar.
Much easier.
And you guys are an awesome team to work with. We love community. You guys have great communication and just a fun team to work with. So let's dive into Red Mountain Vineyard here. I'm going to do a quick screen share just so we can get an idea about where Red Mountain Vineyard is on Red Mountain and all that good stuff. So we're going to go ahead and share this here. And all right, so here we are. We've got, of course, you've got the Columbia River right here. We've got Walla Walla down here. And as Todd and Eduardo mentioned, it's a roughly 80-mile drive to get from Walla Walla all the way through Tri-Cities up to Red Mountain here. So we'll dive into Benton City as we get a little closer here. And pretty simple. I mean, this is actually Red Mountain right here. You can see the top ridge of the mountain. And here it slopes all the way down to the Yakima River. And you can see that RMV, as we like to call it, Red Mountain Vineyard, is pretty much smack dab in the middle of Red Mountain. It's kind of the heart of the mountain right there. And as we zoom in, we'll show you some of our blocks that we work with. So these are the two winery buildings that used to be there, and you guys use them. I don't think you're actually producing wine in there. It's just for shop maintenance stuff. Is that right?
Yeah, I think our last vintage of making wine out there was 2015.
Okay.
But still it's still our primary vineyard shop.
Yeah.
And where we do all of our harvest loading. So doesn't totally go to waste.
Yeah. So this block right here, this is our Merlot block, block H. And then right here is we have roughly 1 acre of Merlot, 1 acre of Cab Franc right here. And then we have two separate blocks of Cabernet, Block D and Block E. They're about 1.5 acres each. So we've got about 3 acres of Cabernet that we work with right here. Tell us about your neighbors. Who's to the south right here?
So that's DeLille's Grand Ciel vineyard, just to the due south of us.
Okay. And then over here to the east?
To the east, I believe that's Kiona's Heart of the Hill vineyard.
Okay. And then on the north side of the property
is the Hedges Estate Vineyard. I think that's
okay.
I think it's just their main estate.
And over here on the west side, is this still? I can't tell how recent these Google Earth photos are. It feels like we've planted everything out, but is this still unplanted currently?
It is. That parcel is owned by the Kennewick Irrigation District. So
okay, so that they did not sell that when they sold all that other land. They kept that piece right there.
Yeah, and I believe the water right that is shared between that irrigation district is tied to some of those parcels. So it's not one that's likely going to be developed at any point in the future.
I got you.
Foreseeable future. Let's see.
What's the total acreage here at RMV?
The whole property's just under 40 acres. We have about 33 under vine between some of the roads and shopping facilities. So a pretty manageable size. As you mentioned before we acquired it, it was originally developed by John Dingenthal as Sandhill Cellars.
Okay.
I think their last vintage of wine was, I want to say the 2005 were kind of the last things that were on the market, which are probably in a beautiful spot right now, if they still exist in people's cellars. But it was a property that I think was kind of in the second wave that was planted out in the Benton City or the Red Mountain area. Those early pioneers, Ciel de Cheval, Blackwood, Kiona, those all got started and established in kind of the mid to late 70s. This particular property, the oldest block in the northwest corner of the property, was planted in 1989. And then really over the next, primarily the next 5 years through the mid 90s, they filled out most of the property. And I think the last blocks to go in were in 97. So among the older vines on Red Mountain. And at that point in their life stage, they're really kind of hitting their stride, and all the baby fat is stripped away, and it's just that those mature, nice vines where we start to see yields dip down a little bit and get really nice concentration in the fruit.
Because it was planted so long ago, this is definitely wider spacing than we see in a lot of the certainly newer plantings. What are we dealing with out here? What's your spacing, vine spacing and stuff?
Yeah, so these are all 10-foot rows. and with 6-foot spacing in between the vines. So that's certainly a lower density, a wider spacing than we've done in subsequent plantings. But it works pretty well for how this soil profile is situated amongst Red Mountain. That's that kind of middle section of the hill. You still have a very sandy loam that's common throughout, and underneath that you have this impermeable layer of caliche, so calcium carbonate, same chemical composition as a lot of what's in limestone, but becomes a restrictive feature for the vines and for water. In that section, we have about maybe 3 feet, 36 inches of topsoil, which is a really good amount. What the vine can put all of that to use and hold water. As you get more towards the fringes of the AVA and some of the steeper terrain, rockier terrain, some spots you're down to 12 inches or less of soil, which really makes the vine struggle and can cause a lot of variability in those blocks. The wider spacing, when you've got a deeper profile and a little bit more water holding capacity, they're able to stay in balance a little bit better and not need quite as much competition on that shallower soil.
Yeah. What do you know what the soil series, what the name of the soil series is right there at RMV?
I think it's the Warden Hazel Loam. Okay.
Yeah. I know that talking to some other growers over there and also to Kevin Pogue, who is, of course, our geology professor at Whitman and a big wine guy. I think there's over 40 soil series on Red Mountain. So when you, from the very, very top all the way down to the bottom and everything in between, because that area was highly affected by the floods, the Missoula floods that rolled through there. Because your elevation, what's the elevation right there?
I think we're around 700 feet.
Okay, so that's lower than where we are in Walla Walla, where the winery is. So lower elevation. Well, because of that lower elevation, let's talk about the winters. And are you guys dealing with any of the same winter issues that we have here in Walla Walla, where we're dealing with hard winter freezes? That lower elevation certainly, if we were at 700 feet in Walla Walla, you probably couldn't grow grapes. So.
Yeah, you'd freeze out just about every year.
Yeah.
It's certainly a macro factor in that area. As those cold winter air masses settle into the basin, it's usually not enough. Or how should I say this? They are certainly affected. Those air masses are large enough to cover that entire elevation and fill up the whole basin. I think the advantages that Red Mountain have on a smaller, more micro scale, you have the wind influence from the Yakima River there, which keeps a little bit of air turbulence and from those cold air masses to just sit there permanently.
Right.
The other advantage they have necessarily over Walla Walla is that since it is a warmer region, we're coming out of bud break, out of dormancy earlier in the season, and that pushes up our harvest window as well. So most of the time, fruit is off the vine at least 2 weeks prior to Walla Walla. And as soon as that vine is picked, or as soon as the fruit is picked, signals to the vine, hey, we can start to go into our dormancy process. So when those big polar air masks start to come down, the vines are further along in that cold hardiness process, hardening off, and are less susceptible to bad winter kill. So still a concern, but usually by the time that weather comes through, hopefully in December and January, the vines are well put to bed, protected from it.
Yeah, and you also have, even where your vineyard is, it's not the lowest spot on the mountain either. There's plenty of lower elevations for that cold air to kind of drift on by, and you can see in the picture behind me there. That's going slightly down in elevation towards Grand Ciel down there. So we'll let the cold air pool in their vineyard, not on ours. I don't remember ever having to cut that vineyard down to the ground. Have we? Have you ever had to do that?
No, we haven't.
Okay. Yeah.
No, it's been a pretty good site. And like Todd mentioned, being able to harvest the fruit early, at least a couple of weeks early, those vines have enough time to go dormant.
That's right.
And even though the temperature has been changing a lot the last few years, I think the temperature changes, they really helping us because the temperature haven't really dropped that much.
I know that we're typically pulling Merlot off of that vineyard in whatever a normal year is, but it's typically within the first 10 days of September. That's when we're picking Merlot, and then Cab and Cab Franc will start, a week to 10 days after that. And of course, we like to do multiple picks in those blocks, so we have some early Cabernet and some later Cabernet to be able to have different flavor profiles and stuff in there. But typically we're off the vine before October 1. Yeah, in most vintages. I think last year, Keith, we didn't start until the 22nd or 23rd of September.
Yep.
Anywhere. And I believe it was Red Mountain Merlot was one of the first picks.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was Red Mountain Merlot, but we were in October on the Cabernet and Cab Franc.
Right.
Both.
Right. Yeah. But they were all, as Keith and I were talking about the other day, the 22s are just rocking. So we're really excited. We're going to be sitting down here fairly soon, I think in March, to start blending some of this stuff. So, very happy with it. Even with that little bit of a later finish. We didn't see any of those extreme cold temperatures roll in this past October like we've had in past years. So, thankfully, 3.5 weeks of great weather actually in October. So, well, Eduardo, why don't you talk a little bit about your farming practices out there? Maybe talk about the trellising system that you've got set up, and just sort of some of the practices that you guys do, especially with things like cover cropping. You can see the cover crop behind my head here. Some of the cover cropping things you guys are doing, some of the fertilization things that you guys are doing out there to keep those vines healthy.
Well, we do a lot of compost. We do compost every year. And sometimes for cover crop, we use winter wheat. That's the only thing that grows at Red Mountain because it's so hot. So wheat is the only thing that we can use as a cover crop.
And the cover crop does not get watered, correct? I mean, it's just whatever irrigation it has through the winter.
Yeah, that's the only thing that it gets, just the rain.
And in that area, we're usually at about 6 inches or less of precip annually, and that really only falls in the winter months. So we've tried to use this winter wheat, get it established over the winter, and then hold that kind of carpet on the soil to lock in moisture and prevent wind erosion and runoff for the whole rest of the year. Sorry, you can keep going.
And the farming, we start pruning January, February, and then bud break happens, around April 20th, and then we start shooting in bloom. Start at the end of May, first week of June, we have full bloom, and then we start just doing a lot of hand labor, leafing, cluster thinning, making sure we're not overcrop. We always with the goal, to be 3.5 tons per acre, and hoping that you guys like the fruit at the end of the season.
Yeah, that's being in a warm area, you can hang a little heavier crop load on Red Mountain. I mean, Merlot should be 4 ton to the acre out there. If you were growing Merlot to be 2 ton to the acre, you'd be picking it in the middle of August.
Right. And
so you really almost have to hang a heavier crop because of all that heat. It's always about balance. I know you use that word a lot, Eduardo, when you talk about growing, and we use that word a lot in the winery as well. Every vine, you can't just, there's not a blanket statement about, the perfect tons per acre. It's site dependent, varietal dependent, and all that stuff. And of course, vintage dependent. Cooler vintage, you may want to drop some fruit. Warmer vintage, you can hang a little more. And I think our Cabernet is right in that 3 to 3.5 ton range. I think we target 3.5 every year for Cab and Cab Franc out there as well. The interesting thing with that spacing, the 10 by 6, you're at, what is that? 800 something plants per acre.
26.
Yeah. Each plant, when you look at it, looks like it has a lot of fruit. And so you're standing back and looking at this plant, and it's just a row of fruit, but you have to take in mind that you have a lot less plants per acre. And so those vines can carry more fruit because of that. And it's vertical shoot positioning in the entire vineyard. And as you can see with the you guys brought up a higher bar here for the wire, that catch wire. On the sun side, you'll leave that wire down, correct?
Yes.
On the afternoon side, so you get some draping on the sun side, and then they'll use the catch wire up on the morning side to expose that fruit a little bit, and get some sunshine on the eastern side of that right there.
Like Wardo mentioned, we're farming in the extremes, and when we're looking at temperatures that can be 105, I think 110 is probably coming up on us pretty soon here. We really try to do what we can to protect the fruit from those extremes. Like you said, Trey, a little bit of extra shade by having a little drooping or sagging on that afternoon side gives a better shade coverage for that fruit during the peak heat part of that day when you're hitting those 107, 108 temps. It can prevent a lot of sunburn. And to counteract that on the morning side, again, like you said, pin things up pretty tight. So when the morning sun comes in and warms up, you still get a little bit of exposure and better color development on the berries themselves.
Yeah. On the wine side of things, Keith, when we'll work with Red Mountain, like what do you think are some of the signature profiles of Red Mountain fruit that we get from RMV?
Well, first off, like with everything coming from this team, the fruit is absolutely picture perfect clean. So very minimal sorting, and which makes it a pleasure to work with. Nobody loves spending too much time on the sorting table. And we are able to keep that pretty much whole berry fermented through. We don't add any yeast, obviously, trying to really enhance the differences between the sites rather than influence them with our choices in the cellar. And so for me, I find that this site probably consistently makes up the biggest percentage of the Illusionist year after year, almost every year, particularly cooler years. I expect it to be a huge chunk of the Illusionist in 2022 because the cooler vintage. So the overall, when I think about the Red Mountain fruit, I think about the structure it brings. I think of it as kind of the skeleton, kind of the profile of the wine that's then filled in with the fruit profiles from other sites for both the Archimage and Illusionist. Archimage these days is leaned a little heavier towards Blue Mountain Vineyard, but still with the Illusionist for sure, the structure and the overall direction and perspective, I think, comes from the Red Mountain fruit and then is filled in with our other sites. So, it's fun fruit to work with. It handles new oak incredibly well.
How about your tannin? What about tannin management in the cellar? What are we doing that is the thing about Red Mountain in general. They are big, burly wines. And I know that we work a lot on our tannin management. So by the time we get these wines to bottle and release them, yes, they've got structure to them, but they're not so unruly that you have to lay them down for 15 years before you open them.
Right. Well, we certainly don't push the structure on Red Mountain fruit at all. The biggest tannin management things that we do in the cellar really are time and temperature. And so if we can keep these Red Mountain ferments just a touch cooler for longer, that gives us the amount of time we're looking for on the skins before the tannin profile has gone through the roof. But they're certainly, I would say on average, these are 3 to 5 days shorter macerations than our stuff coming from Walla Walla, purely because of that tannin management. Now, every now and then we really try to push the tannins on at least one lot of this because we love having some of that structure to call on. The other thing we do a lot with Red Mountain is we ferment a lot of it in our oak fermenters, which in general I find bring a plusher tannin profile to the finished product than our stainless steel or our concrete ferments. So for me, it's a matter of trying not to let these ferments get too hot, so that we can get the amount of time we're looking for before the tannin profile has gone high. And one of the best tools for that is those oak fermenters. because they keep that tannin profile a little more moderated.
And we definitely find that Red Mountain is aptly named because the fruit leans more red fruited rather than dark fruited. So you definitely get that, sort of Bing cherry component. You always hear minerality as a tasting note with Red Mountain too. And like it really has it just feels like it has a high mineral content or something in there. So almost like a vitamin, like a Flintstones vitamin component sometimes. But yeah, as Keith mentioned, it's typically a large part of the Illusionist. The Cab Franc we get from there, we love as well. We've done. We have a Red Mountain Crooked Arm, don't we?
Yes, we did in the 2017.
17, yeah.
Yeah, the 2017 was Red Mountain Vineyard. Yeah, that Cab Franc basically always goes into the Archimage. And the Merlot does too. It's just that we have so much less of it than we do the Blue Mountain fruit that really makes up the core of that wine. So, pretty much everything from Red Mountain, maybe not every single barrel, but every block is contributing to our reserve wines almost every single year.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great site. Yeah, it's a great site. And the entire vineyard is planted out to Bordeaux varietals. Am I correct? It's just Cab Franc, and Merlot in that 33 acres.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
No Malbec or Carmenere or Petit Verdot, just the big three.
Yeah. It's been an interesting AVA to watch since I've 23 years into the wine business now. And when you were driving by Red Mountain in 2001, you could tell exactly where the vineyards were. It was just, a green patch over here, a green patch over there, and then just nothing in between.
Yeah,
and that's the thing. They really weren't growing. It's not like they were growing apples and they ripped apples out to plant vineyards. There just wasn't anything on Red Mountain because it's so hot. And as you guys mentioned, from the cover crop standpoint, there's only a couple of things you can throw down that are going to survive without irrigation. And it's not the friendliest place to farm, but it farms really good wine grapes. Now you drive by the mountain, or that overview that I showed you guys before, almost every square inch of that mountain is planted out to wine grapes now. And it's pretty special AVA. I know people talk about Walla Walla a lot in name, but Red Mountain is always the second thing you hear when people are talking about Washington State from the standpoint of high quality wines coming from a particular area. And you guys have a gem of a vineyard right there in the heart of the hill. So we're fortunate to be able to work with it. So Keith,
and well, again, I have such loyal and great clients such as you that keep making outstanding wines to carry the torch of the hard work we do in the vineyard.
Fantastic.
We do our best. Keith, do you have any other questions for these gentlemen?
I do. I just have one and I'd like both of them to give their thought. We've talked a lot about Red Mountain here, and we didn't really contrast it to Walla Walla, but if you're following this video series, you're going to see that this conversation was very different than the one about Blue Mountain Vineyard, as far as different soils, different elevations, very different climate. So just out of curiosity, cover crop, just out of curiosity, what do each of you think is the biggest challenge of farming such dramatically different sites?
I know what his answer is going to be, but it's definitely the irrigation and water management on a hot site like that. The sandy soil that drains quickly, coupled with just scorching heat throughout the summer, and there's such little margin for error that whenever we're making irrigation decisions and trying to find that perfect balance point between water stress for fruit concentration without sending the vine into dehydration, starvation mode, that is the biggest thing in the back of our minds. I know Eduardo's mind, that keeps us up at night during the growing season.
I agree. This is the water. Red Mountain needs water every single week. You just keep one set of water and you see a lot of stress on the vine, and you can get a lot of shrivel. So we pay a lot of attention to the water. Blue Mountain, we get more rains, we get a lot more water. So we don't really water Blue Mountain. Maybe a few shots at the end of August just to hold the fruit. But that's the big difference, the water.
Yeah, in Walla Walla, we're trying to find ways to diffuse the vigor, especially early season when those deep soils are totally charged from the winter snow and precipitation, and get them kind of in their cruising altitude, if you will, by mid-season once that profile's drained. Whereas Red Mountain, really from day one of the growing season, in mid-April, we're trying to keep as close of an eye on moisture and irrigation until that fruit comes in and the vines get their last drink sometime in October or November.
And then, since you brought up water, your water source at Red Mountain, do you guys have a well there, or are you pulling off the river?
Yeah, so that one is a deep well aquifer. I think it's the Saddle Mountain Aquifer, which is a very deep one. It was I think it's a 800 or 900 foot deep well, so certainly not cheap to get established, but has been a very reliable water source for us. And responsible use of that resource is going to become a growing issue for all agriculture on the West Coast, as we're seeing with Colorado River issues in the news recently. So that's been, again, a very reliable source for us, and one that we don't see being interrupted in the near future quite as dramatically as some of the surface water sources. We see.
That's
Grapes don't use as much water as a lot of other crops out there either, and so especially the way you guys are farming it too, where you're really trying to dial it in, week by week. So
and it's all drip system, where you're looking at, I think it's 90+% efficiency. I know some of the Israeli companies have vineyards that are like 97% efficiency, which is crazy. And we're always looking at ways to keep improving our practices and put that resource to the best use. But yeah, no one is flood irrigating out there, and just having all kinds of runoff. It's too precious to waste.
We've come a long ways. We've come a long ways as an industry.
Yes, we have.
From old school real irrigation, where they were just literally, opening a valve and sending it down a little channel right next to the vine where it sat there for who knows how long. So, we've come a long way for sure. So,
absolutely.
Awesome. All right, gentlemen. Well, thank you so much. We're looking forward to the 2023 growing season with you. And for all you folks watching, thanks for joining us. You can catch the rest of our vineyard series on our YouTube channel. See all the other vineyards we're working with. We're going to finish off the year. We'll have, I think we're going to do 11 total interviews for the year for all the vineyard sites and all of our vineyard managers. So hopefully it's a good resource for you guys to be able to come back to if you have a question about a particular vineyard or AVA. These are always fun to come back to and watch. So other than that, we look forward to seeing you in our tasting rooms in both Soto and Walla Walla. And until then, thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.